everybody. Good morning if you're on the West Coast. Welcome to Race Talk Revolution, where your voice matters. I'm your host and founder of Race Talk Revolution Incorporated, Reverend Lane Cobb. And if you're tuning in and expecting to see my regular partner and co-host, Reverend Eugene Holden, he is taking some time off from this broadcast. Stepping into the co-host role with me for the next several weeks are Mr. A.J. Woodson of Black Westchester Magazine, who was with me last week, and the person who is with me today, a Catholic social ethicist, racial justice advocate, and award-winning author, Alex McCulloch. And I'm going to ask Alex to introduce himself to you and tell you all what our topic is for today.
Thank you, Reverend Lane. Delightful to be with you. Welcome, everyone, and happy beginning of summer. First, I just want to say I miss Reverend Eugene, and I will do my best to follow his wise witness. I bring 20 years experience practicing anti-racism as a Catholic theologian. I've devoted my scholarship and activism to addressing anti-Black white supremacy in the U.S. Catholic Church and society. My recent book, entitled Unlearning White Supremacy, A Spirituality for Racial Liberation, was released last week by Orbis Books. I also serve as a co-facilitator for White Caucus of the Spiritus Anti-Racism Coalition in Rochester, New York. I am delighted to serve you and Reverend Lane as a co-host for the program today. Our topic today is gun control in communities of color. We are joined by an expert panel who will discuss what their organizations are doing to control gun violence and increase safety. Race Talk Revolution is a loving, inclusive platform designed to strip away the false beliefs that keep us separated as a species, uncover the not so hidden truth that we all want the same things in life, and to heal the wounds created by systemic racism. Race Talk Revolution is a safe and brave space for people of all backgrounds to share ideas and opinions and explore the nuances of systemic racism while together growing our capacity for effective anti-racist activism. The Race Talk Revolution community is committed to practicing radically inclusive love. Even if you do not understand or agree with what is being shared, we ask you to listen with respect, appreciation, and empathy. It is our commitment that every person be encouraged, heard, and appreciated. Because here on Race Talk Revolution, every voice matters.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. So I'm going to begin by introducing our panelists by reading some bios. We recommend after the show that you do look up these kind folks because they have some very impressive work that they've done. Leading our panel today is Ms. Joanne Dunn. She is the Executive Director of the Youth Shelter Program of Westchester. Ms. Dunn is the first woman to lead the organization since its inception in 1975. Conceived by a Westchester judge and school teacher who recognized the need for early intervention in the lives of young offenders, the Youth Shelter Program of Westchester has been providing a home-like alternative to jail for young men for over 40 years. Ms. Dunn's commitment to youth is more of a calling than a job. She has served as a troop leader for the Westchester Putnam Girl Scouts, a member of the Peekskill City School District's Parental Community Involvement Committee, a parent coordinator for the Peekskill Pop Warner Football League, and as an executive board member for the Peekskill NAACP, where she was recognized for her outstanding service to youth and families. She previously served on the advisory board for the SUNY Westchester Educational Opportunity Center, Westchester County's Fatherhood Committee, and the Arts 10566 Advisory Board. She is a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority and was awarded a 40 under 40 award by the Business Council of Westchester. Ms. Dunn has brought her family with her today. Her brother, Paul Dunn, is the Gun and Violence Prevention Director of the Boys and Girls Clubs of the New York Capital Area region. He brings a wide range of experience with him when it comes to working with our youth and has been in the education field for 16 years. Currently, Mr. Dunn is a behavior specialist at KIPP Albany Community Charter School and serves as the Gun and Violence Prevention Director. His main goal is to educate the youth about gun violence and teach them programs like Smart Moves, where young people ages 6 to 18 engage in discussion and role playing, practicing resilience and refusal skills, developing assertiveness, strengthening decision-making skills, and analyzing media and peer influence. Alex, is it okay if I continue? Okay. Our next two speakers both work with the New York State Department of Criminal Justice Services SNUG Community Outreach Program, spelled SNUG. SNUG is an evidence-based street outreach program based on the Cure Violence model in Chicago, which treats gun violence like a disease by identifying its causes and interrupting its transmission. The program focuses on youth between the ages of 14 and 24 who are at high risk for involvement and gun violence. The SNUG team develops and implements risk reduction strategies to reduce that involvement with the goal of saving lives and helping individuals turn their lives around. Deborah Long is the program coordinator of SNUG and Youth Services. As a positive community leader, Deborah believes that one of her most vital roles is to assist the community as a whole, as well as assist the community in critically evaluating, analyzing, and solving problems. To be successful as a community leader and supporting a local public educational system means to see life through different lenses so that new strategies are constantly being adapted, created, analyzed, and evaluated in the ever-changing classroom to ensure the best possible student learning outcomes are being achieved. Not only has she been a positive community leader, she's a mother who personally experienced the loss of her son by a senseless act of gun violence. Deborah is passionate about helping youth and families in the community. Also here with us today is Mr. Henry Terry. Mr. Terry joined Mount Vernon SNUG 209 in May of 2016 as an outreach worker and was promoted to the position of outreach worker supervisor in October of 2018. He became a statewide trainer for the SNUG initiative in December 2019, where he currently provides training for all new hires and those moving on to management positions. Being a proud member of SNUG, Henry has many other roles in the community. Mr. Terry is also the co-creator of the Youth CRED program in partnership with the Youth Shelter of Westchester and the Youth Bureau of Westchester County. Wow, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. That's quite a lot of experience. We so appreciate your coming here to discuss this critical topic with us today. As we discussed, Ms. Dunn, I'm going to turn the conversation over to you, but I'd like to offer just a little bit of background for folks who might find it helpful, if that's okay. Just want people to understand that Black Americans are disproportionately impacted by gun violence. I don't think that's a secret to anybody who's on this broadcast right now. They experience 10 times the gun homicides, 18 times the gun assault injuries, and nearly 3 times the fatal police shootings of white Americans. Gun homicides, assaults, and police shootings are disproportionately prevalent in historically underfunded neighborhoods and cities. Lack of funding is just one of the issues people who live in these areas face, and often it's the people themselves who get blamed for the proliferation of violence, when the problem often is in large part this country's long-standing racial inequities. So everyone on this panel represents an organization that works within these communities to reduce gun violence and increase safety. What I'd like you all to do is to talk about the work that you do and how your approach is making a difference. One of the things that perhaps would be good to address also is a question that a lot of people ask, which is, why is there so much gun violence in communities of color? And what can we do about it? So thank you so much, Ms. Dunn. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have to say, Lane, that was a mouthful. I mean, trying to get everybody's bio out. So I appreciate you for really taking the time to properly introduce us. So again, good afternoon, everyone. We are actually really glad to be here. I bring you greetings, as Lane said, on behalf of the Youth Shelter Program of Westchester, which is a unique program, and it is one of the counties and one of the New York State's only alternative to incarceration program for young people ages 18 to 24. Technically in New York State, at the age of 18, you can be tried as an adult. And so the youth shelter is a unique place. And you say, why do we want to get involved in gun violence? And it's important to us. Our work is not just about being an intervention component, but it's really about how do we get into the prevention side? Why are young people even coming into the pipeline? And so as we think about the epidemic of gun violence and its roots and centuries of violence and trauma that has perpetuated communities of color, one of the things that we really start to learn is that communities of color are historically under-resourced, right? And there's structural racism, that particularly anti-Black racism, that leaves communities of color disproportionately harmed by gun violence. And so I'm glad today to be here to talk about our approach at the youth shelter to really being in the prevention side of gun violence, and also helping young people who are known shooters, who have been shot, who are high risk young people, to really help them change the narrative for themselves and for their communities. I'm going to apologize too as well to the audience, because my office is housed in an industrial area. So we have Con Ed outside doing the gas lines. We have the bus depot next door. So you might hear some sound bites and some good background noise, but just appreciate it as good sound bites. So I do want to, Lane had already introduced my panelists who are joining me today, but I wanted to share the reason why I thought it was so important for me to tag my brother, Paul Dunn, who is biologically my brother, who is in this work, who is in Albany, New York, doing this work, and I am in Mount Vernon, New York. And for me to tag Deborah Long, who is my lifelong friend, sister in this work. She is in Poughkeepsie, New York, and Henry Terry, of course, is here in Mount Vernon, New York, but does statewide training in New York State for SNUG. I particularly did that on purpose because one of the things that, if we're talking about that this is a nation's epidemic and it's an issue, we have to understand that gun violence has no zip code. And we have to understand that it's going to take each and every one of us, no matter where our feet are planted, to be a part of the solution. And so want to now ask I'm going to actually pivot to Henry Terry, and then I'm going to go into Paul Dunn and then Deborah Long. But Henry Terry, to really talk about his work and what he's doing here locally in Mount Vernon, New York. And actually, what is SNUG, right? People want to know, what is SNUG? This is a national audience. They don't know SNUG. So tell them about SNUG and what SNUG does. So Henry Terry, take it from here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Like Ms. Dunn just so eloquently said, I am Henry Terry. I do supervise the outreach team here in the Mount Vernon area for SNUG, but I also am the lead trainer for SNUG's statewide initiative. And we work to reduce gun violence through conflict mediation with those who are at the highest risk of being shot themselves or shooting someone else. And we do that by first being able to identify who these individuals are. Once we can identify who these individuals are, we then have a calculated, put together team, engage these individuals, find out why these individuals are even engaged in the things that they're engaged into. And like Ms. Dunn was saying, a lot of the time, it's because of the level of poverty that these young men and women live in, and not having and wanting, and what it is that they see and what it is that they hear and the things that they're being exposed to at the level of poverty in which they're living in. So they're trying everything that they can and doing anything that they can to obtain the things that they see, whether it be on social media, whether it be on a TV show, whether it be in a song that they're hearing over the radio. You know, their biggest dream is to obtain these things by whatever means they have to obtain them by. So we reach out to these individuals, and some of these individuals, you know, this is just a way of life. This is not something that they've walked into or even chosen a lot of times for themselves. A lot of these individuals, they're generationally doing these things because it's what's been passed down from generation to generation, not knowing that there's so much more to life and so much more out in the community that they can obtain, because it's not something that's offered. We have to have the resources not only available, but we also have resources. They have to know that the resources are there. You know, just having the resources available and not giving the people the information as to how to obtain those resources, it's not helping them at all.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you for that context. And can you tell the audience, what is SNUG?
SNUG, in my opinion, is a lifesaver, because we're out in the trenches, and these individuals who are pulling these triggers and who are on the opposite side of these triggers, we're working with both sides of the spectrum. We work with the perpetrators of violence, but we also work with the victims of violence. One, to get to the source of it all. Two, to give them both the understanding and the options of what else is out there for them. You know, we're working in capacity of being mentors, working in capacity of providing work resources, life skill resources, parenting resources, educational resources, right? But also, and a key component to it all is our therapeutic resources. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of them don't know that this is not a way of life.
Yeah. And Henry, I think also sharing with the audience, so just audience, because this is, SNUG is also a community-based initiative that focuses on violence interruption. And Henry, I think also sharing the fact about how you take individuals with lived experience within the criminal justice system to help be a cure to violence. And so if you could share why that's so important to have credible messengers in this work that we're doing.
It's very important and it's very vital, because these credible messengers, like Joanne said, they're a part of that community. And not only are they a part of the community, but they were also a part of the community that the community used to fear and used to try to shy away from, because they were known for perpetuating the same violence that lives today, right? These individuals have since changed their lives and have the opportunity, from the side of being a perpetrator of violence and having that understanding of it and having that life lived experience of it, help someone else who's coming into that to not go there, and to not just advise them on why they shouldn't, but give them real life experiences and facts about why they shouldn't go there, and what that does to your family, what that does to the family of the victim that you've imposed your will upon, what that does to you mentally, physically, and how that takes you from the person who you know yourself to be to becoming someone that you would later not even recognize. So it's very important to have these people in place, because it's not just someone giving advice. It's someone sharing a story, someone sharing their actual experience, and someone who has actually been in the shoes that these young people are attempting to fill now.
Absolutely, Henry. I think you hit the nail on the head, is that as we change our communities, we have to also not look at the victims, but we also have to look at the perpetrators of violence, and how do we change that narrative and perspective for them. And so you talked about how their lived experiences really helps channel them to be a power for good in their society, and how Snug really helps cultivate them to make sure that they have that they're equipped to do this work. And so much appreciated for sharing that. I'm going to pivot to Deborah Long, because I think, Paul, I'm going to get to you. I know you're waiting patiently, but I think Deborah Long has such a profound piece of why she does this work. And we talk about, she's going to talk to you about Snug and what she does with Snug. But I think her lived experience, as we understand that Black men and teens are the highest death rates when it comes to gun violence. And so sharing her lived experience, I remember Deborah Long and I used to work together, and she can tell you, and I can tell, if I can start here, Deborah, you give me a nod. Okay, if I can start here. We were sitting in the office together. We shared an office at our prior job, and the phone call rang. And when the phone call rang, Debbie had gotten the call that her son was murdered in Brooklyn, New York. I remember when we dropped that phone, literally, I was in panic. Like, I didn't know what to do. And I said, we gotta go, we gotta go. And Deborah, if you get to know Deborah Long, she is strength personified, because she is one of those women that really, as she received the call that her son was dead in Brooklyn, New York, yet she held it together to make sure she wasn't responding off of emotion, but really responding wisely. And so to this day, she gets tremendous credit from me, because she has held that to her vest, to be a charge, to be a person to uplift, to empower our communities. And I'm so honored to know her. I'm honored to see her work. And so, Debbie, please tell these people why Randy's death is not in vain, and why you continue to chart this work every day. So thank you.
Good afternoon. I'd like to start by saying thank you, Joanne. Joanne was a mess. Gerald Francis was a mess. And I looked at both of them like, okay, stop crying and pull it together. We're all going to get through this together. That's exactly how it started. I'm in this work. Let me just give you a little bit about me. When I received that call, initially I didn't know what to think. But then I thought about myself as a parent. I've been a single parent. I gave my kids the best that I could. Never condoned any negative behavior. There was no reason for my kids to be in the street. But I immediately realized I was a great parent, but I had a child like everyone else that made a bad decision, and it cost him his life. Still today, I feel no guilt. I was able to stand up in front of at my son's funeral. Ms. Dunn, I see you're on the call. I had a lot of support. I thought what was imperative at his service, that I could speak about gun violence, that his death was a direct result of making a decision because of peer pressure. I talked about the importance of educating our Black and brown babies. I talked about the importance of parents being involved in their kids' lives, opening up their book bags, check from school, find out what's going on in school. These are the things that lead to situations like this. When my kids were coming up, I took the doors off their bedrooms. So when they came into my house, they dumped their book bag, no doors. I wanted to be nosy, and I wanted to be involved in everything. So still didn't excuse me from being, as I deem myself, an excellent parent, to have a son murdered. His death really got me involved into the community. And I began to work with individuals who had also lost individuals. That led me several years later. And so everyone's on this call. It's been 17 years and we still don't have an arrest. But I can say this transparently. We don't have an arrest because no one has absolutely put anything in writing, but we have confirmed that his best friend was the one who set him up. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about his best friend. Came from a very disenfranchised home, dysfunctional. I took him into my home for 8 years, paid for his education, took care of him just like my son. And he was the one that set my son up. Fast forward, I stand here today as I'm honored to be a part of SNUG. I can take my passion and work with the mothers and the individuals who have absolutely experienced the same thing I have. Mr. Terry had put in perspective, one of the greatest parts of my job that I enjoy doing is being able to put the perpetrator and the victim in the same room. Because I want to know what they are beefing about. And everyone on this call, not one time has anybody been able to identify why they're beefing. Peer pressure is the worst thing that our kids are dealing with today. And the demon, I wish we could get rid of it, is social media. If we can get rid of social media today, I think we would really begin to decrease the number of shootings. I call my personal, I believe social media is its own pandemic. Just in Poughkeepsie, just last week, we had 2 females shot for a post that was put on Facebook, 32 responses, ended up in 2 people shot, 1 being pregnant. So I want to thank Joanne for allowing me to have me on this call. It is an honor. It takes a community to raise a village. It takes a community as a whole. We all have to stand in solidarity and fight together. It just can't be SNUG in Buffalo. It can't be the Westchester Youth Shelter. It can't be Paul in Albany. We all have to collectively get together and stop this movement, utilizing the public health approach that Mr. Terry identified. So you identify, you interrupt the transmission, you identify the transmitter, and we really got to work on changing these kids, their parents, and the community's group and social norms. And then I'm going to pass it back to Joanne. The one thing that I definitely want to say that is big for me is we got to educate the parents today that they have to be parents and not friends, because the parents are hanging out, halfway dressed with their kids, they're smoking weed. We have to learn to be parents and not friends. So thank you.
Thank you, Deb. And I think you say something so profound. We have to change the social norms in our communities. I think that also, you know, there's a couple of angles here that when we talk about addressing gun violence, it's not just community being violence interrupters and using individuals with lived experience to help us triage and heal our communities forward, but then how do we help the parents, right? How do we help the children? How do we, you know, make sure that as community-based organizations that we're working in collaboration and not in competition? Because as we said before, historically, communities of colors are under-resourced. And so a lot of times we're fighting for the same funding stream. And so, you know, Deb, you said a lot of points here in regards to that we need to make sure that as a collective, that we're tackling this from all angles. And we're going to get to the point later on in the conversation about legislation and then how you can help, but we're not there yet, okay? So we're going to pivot to Mr. Paul Dunn, who is my brother. People say we look like twins, but I'm the better version. So, but just want to get to my brother, who is my biological brother, Paul Dunn. And I want to shout out my mom, who is on this call. And really, it is an honor to work with him too as well. We bleed the same blood, and we really care about this work that we do. And so my brother comes to this work from not only being an educator, working in the schools, and working in college, but also being someone now who is boots on the ground in Albany, New York, at the Boys and Girls Club, who is really trying to do some preventive work with young people. And so, Paul, please unmute and tell us about you and the work that you're doing.
Good afternoon, everyone. As my older sister said, I can say that part, right, guys? Older sister. Joanne said, I'm honored to be on this call today, to be with all of you guys. Just the simple fact that we're having this conversation about gun violence is something that has plagued our community, not just in Albany, but it's a national plague that's happening. So I'm honored to be on this call and be a part of this conversation. Some of the work that I do or I have done, I started out in higher education as working as a EOP counselor. If you're not familiar with EOP, it's a Office of Opportunity Programs in SUNY. And what I did there is I worked with a diverse background of students who had a disadvantaged background academically and socially. So I worked with that population for 12 years, and I've seen some of the pitfalls of some of our people coming into college. And I always said to myself, I need to do something else, and I need to do something and catch it at the lower level. So it was a state job. A lot of people looked at me like, you're leaving your state job? I said, yeah, I think God is calling me to do something else. So with that, at that time, I left and I came to the elementary level, and I became a behavior specialist where I'm currently in right now at Camp Albany Community Charter School in Albany, New York. And I'm a behavior specialist, and I also teach third grade ELA. And my night job is the Gun and Violence Prevention Director at the Boys and Girls Club of the Capital Area District. So I'm very busy. I don't sleep, but I feel like when you're doing this type of work, you can't sleep because you got to be passionate about it. So I see the best of both worlds. So in the daytime, I'm educating people. I'm educating our young people, and we need them to improve their education because, as a lot of you know, by how a kid scores on their third grade exam, that's how they know how many jails they're going to build. So it's very important that we educate our students. And then at nighttime, I think the key word that we've been talking about so far is prevention. So the Boys and Girls Club where I work at, it's all about prevention and give them activities to do to keep them off the street. And we have so many programs at the Boys and Girls Club. We have a lyricism program where kids can make beats. We have my gun and violence program. We have a national program that we run, which is called Smart Moves, which we work with our students with conflict resolution, and they act out certain things. And every student who comes into the Boys and Girls Clubs, they sign a pledge to no gun violence. So one of the things we're teaching our kids at a younger age is accountability and responsibility. And once you put your name to something, you have to live up to that. So we have them sign that pledge, and that they pledge to no gun violence. They pledge not to bring a gun to school. They pledge not to settle a beef with another student with a gun. We have a basketball program. We have a lot of activities that we do at the Boys and Girls Club. And it's just something that the key word that you hear all across America right now is prevention. You can't be reactive. Reactive is after the fact. We have to be prevented, and we have to keep these young people off the street. And that's what my charge is right now. So that's what I'm working on. And that's what I've been doing at the Boys and Girls Club. And this is fairly a new position at the Boys and Girls Club because here in Albany, the gun violence has sparkled out of control. It's really out of control. And just last month in July, we had 14 homicides over the summer in July. So it's something it's running wild. But the more we stop that is being out there and getting the kids to come into the community. And one of the things that you're starting to see more and more often, that kids at a younger age are using guns too. And they could get them quicker and get them by any means necessary. So one of the things is, like I said, I'm a big component of education. We got to educate these kids by any means necessary and let them know that education is the wave. And then also being involved with them. One of the things I try to do, these kids are not my kids, but I love them as if they are my kids. A lot of times their parents don't show up to games. So you know what, Mr. Dunn, can you come to my baseball game? I'm there. It's just showing them that you care and you'll take the extra steps. So that's one of the things I try to do in this role too, is be a mentor to a lot of these young people. So I'm honored and I'm privileged to be on this call today. And I think it's very important that we do have this conversation and create more of an open dialogue so we can have a plan and then execute the plan. So thank you.
Thank you. I think what's so important here, I think a couple of things you said. I think, we are on the prevention side, but our communities are already grappling with gun violence, right? And so now if we replace the guns, what do our children have? And I think that that's the question that we really need to answer. I think that we can bring, you know, I say this all the time because I work here in Mount Vernon, New York, which is we call it a chocolate city of Westchester County, New York. Because it is a predominantly Black community, or, you know, it is, it looks like Detroit and Atlanta when we talk about, you know, the makeup of our demographic. But I say this all the time is that when we replace the guns, what are we giving our children, right? And so I think that one of the things is that we can come up with great programming and we can do all those things, but we also have to look at the societal issues that are affecting our communities of color. And I think that this is a real conversation we need to have, is because we can build out, you know, a pistols to pens writing program. However, but if your kid has to go back to the same environment that he's getting ill in, and that environment is not conducive to them, how do we help them? And I think that that's the larger conversation that we need to start churning with our local elected officials, because, you know, when our communities of color are grappling with, you know, housing disparities, health inequities, you know, under-resourced in regards to programming, or just there's no jobs, the economics. And I think that that's the larger issue that we need to talk about. I run here the county's alternative to incarceration program. So a lot of the young people that I have that live in our residential alternative to incarceration program are young men that are known shooters who have had a gun, who have bought ghost gun parts, assembled them, and sold them. And so we had a closed, confidential session with those young men that say, hey, how did you even get access to these guns? Like, what happened? And a lot of them, it said, like, if you didn't have to live in the streets, what else would you want to do? And it's so interesting that they said that they would just want to, they've never experienced going camping. They've never experienced, you know, riding a horse, things that young people really want to do. When you get to, young people are not born bad criminals, right? And so one of the things that we understand even more and more now that we're starting to get involved in this work, is not just exposure and engagement that our young people need, but they need the opportunities right there. They need access to them. And I think when you look at communities of color, the access for opportunities is not where the young people meet. And so there's a big disconnect in the middle. And so, you know, my mom used to say an idle mind becomes a devil's workshop. And so for the young people, that's exactly what is happening. There is nothing in between to fill that void or that gap. And so it's getting access to, whether it's the streets or getting access to ghost guns and selling them and making some money. But if we were really to have real economic drivers and housing and all those other things, could that possibly eliminate young people from doing that? And that's the question that we really need to talk to. And we need to, and I think also getting to the place of, and we're going to talk to this panel, you know, one of the things, our communities are in a trauma response mode. And I think that one of the things we need to understand that is that guns were here, so was food inequities, housing inequities, health inequities, all of these things. But I think COVID exacerbated it, right? And so now we're in a place where our communities are in that fight or flight mode, right? And so they're responding to things that necessarily we wouldn't in a rational response. And so just want to talk more to, like Henry talked from the beginning about, like, the clinical piece is the most important piece that they're doing with the work of SNUG. And so want to ask this panel about not only the infusement of the work that you're doing in regards to exposure, enrichment, opportunities, but why is mental health and the clinical piece is so important to triaging gun violence? Because whether we are not shot, we all are affected by it. And so want to understand why that's so important to you in the work that you're doing. And so start with Henry, pivot to Deborah, and then Paul. How about that? Right? There we go. So Henry, you're on.
I think that it's so important because when you do what you feel is the norm, or what's supposed to be done, or you're doing things the way that things have always been done in your eyes, then you don't really understand how wrong you actually are, right? Or how damaging it is, the actions that you're taking. But when that can be explained to you and broken down to you so that you better understand yourself, better understand your circumstances, and then clearly understand that this is not normal, you have a better shot at living an actual life, not just a normal life, or what you thought was a normal life, right? Knowing and understanding what it is that you're doing, where it is that you are, and what's causing you to do those things, and what's causing you to be in the place that you are, gives you the ability to better navigate your life and make better decisions in regards to your life, right? And also helps you better affect other people's lives that you may engage or come in contact with. So it's very important that we address the mental state of our communities, not just our young people. I'm talking about our communities as a whole, because these young people who are broken, they're being raised by parents who are broken, and these parents are giving their broken pieces to their broken children, who are coming into a broken household, a broken environment, a broken way of living, a broken way of seeing things, a broken way of accepting things, right? And a broken way of responding to things. So repairing those broken pieces is the most important for me.
Agreed. Miss Long, jump on in here because I can keep going. I can tag off of Henry. You know, he
Okay.
starts throwing some stuff out there.
Thank you, Henry. So for me, being an African American, I think one of the key things that we need to do before we can start to change the norm, because carrying a gun is a norm right now. We need to change the mindset of the parents in the African American ethnicity, because coming up, we were always told, whatever happens in this house stays in this house. You do not bring any type of problems in here. You know, we were told that mental health services is for Caucasian people. We deal with our own way. This is how we handle it. So when we begin to educate everyone that mental health is real, mental health services are effective. You just have to learn to work the program. When African Americans and Brown and Latino individuals begin to accept that, and we begin as a community to change that, trauma is detrimental. We always say at our shooting responses, which is so true, hurt people hurt people. And until they can get rid of that hurt, it's just going to be a complete cycle. I'm just going to share a quick story that just happened in terms of trauma. So I'm from Poughkeepsie. On Father's Day, we had 3 people shot in front of all kinds of people. And I just said earlier that social media is a demon. They put the video was leaked to social media. My phone was nonstop yesterday. I had about 50 people called, just traumatized of the video that were not personally involved, asking me to help them get into grieving counseling. So you don't have to be related to that individual. This is a societal, systemic problem. Now I'm working on getting individuals who watch this video, and when I tell you it was absolutely disturbing, they want trauma. They want trauma services. They want informed trauma care to help them deal with this. It is imperative. I don't have the answer. I don't know how we're going to change this, but it's individuals who are on this radio station. If we could collectively come together, become strategic to change that mindset, because in those families, if we don't change the way that they're thinking, our kids are just going to continue to shoot each other.
Absolutely. I think, again, it's going to take every last one of us to help heal our communities forward. And Paul, there's a question that is in the chat. And since we're talking about mental health, I'm going to ask you to answer it in regards to the work that you're doing too, as well, with the young people at the Boys and Girls Club. But how do you change the mindset of broken parents? And how do you help that family dynamic when you're talking about doing this work at the Boys and Girls Club? So, Paul.
I'm just gonna jump in real quick and echo some of the same sentiments that my colleagues said about brokenness. And when you talk about brokenness, Frederick Douglass said a quote. He said, "It's easier to repair easier to build up a child than to build a broken man." And I think in that piece, some of the things we really have to look at is, as I said, I'm a big component of education. We have to educate the parents. We have to let them know they have access. As you said, Ms. Long, we have to let them know they have access to these programs. They have access to getting help. Maybe we create more of a referral process, for the parents, but one of the things that a parent can't deny is when they see the change on their kid. And when their kid is shining and doing what they need to do, "Oh, where'd you learn that from?" "I learned that from the Boys and Girls Club." "Or I learned that from Snub, Mr. Terry and Miss Long," or "I learned that from Miss Dunn." So they're learning these things from other people. And the only thing they could do is go back home. And now they have to be the ones that educate their parents, even though it should be the reverse way around. You get what I'm saying? So I think, and the other thing we have to look at, and Miss Long, you hit at it, which is very key in our communities, is that getting services of extra help and counseling is looked at as frowned upon. "Oh, you're crazy. What are you going to see a counselor for?" Or "We don't do that. Our people don't do that." No, it's at a time that, mental health and mental awareness is very real. So we have to go get our children checked out. The parents may need to go get checked out. Family counseling may need to happen. These are things we have to do. And these are some of the steps that we have to take to start to repair some of that brokenness. Because guess what? Rome wasn't built in a day. You took step by step and brick by brick. So that's what we have to do. We have to take them step by step. And then you know what? Then the parent will come around. Then the mom will come around. And it, as I said, it takes education, mentorship, health awareness, all those things. They play a key role in building some of that brokenness. And then hopefully, once they get to a part of that brokenness, they're able to heal from that. And with them being able to heal from that, then they're able to share that with somebody else and let them know what they went through. And then that person could use them and it'll be a testimony.
Absolutely. I think that, of course, there's an investment in mental health services and access. I would also share to this call that I believe that we all, every day, battle our mental health. And so there are variables in life. We all are affected by gun violence that could trigger us to a mental illness, right? And I think that we all have to be cognizant of that every day we battle our mental health and keeping that in check. But if we don't take care of our mental health, then we get a mental illness. And so need to also be aware of that we need to also make sure that we are changing that stigma for our children, that it's okay to tap into to get help and to get connected to resources. I know that I'm supposed to pivot to Reverend Lane Cobb, to actually go forth. But I do want to share that this has been, for us, this is just sharing what we do as boots on the grounds, as community-based organizations. And I know Lane is going to say that you can ask us at this point, right, Lane, if they have any questions or comments. So please.
Yeah, let's go ahead. I mean, Alex, I'm going to let you manage the queue, but let's go ahead and have people raise their hands. If you want to ask a question of our panelists, please do keep your comments and questions under a minute. And then panelists, when you're answering, just be aware, just because we want to make sure that we get as much time for you all to answer questions and people to get on the queue as possible. If you want to raise your hand and don't know how, you can go to the bottom of your screen and there's a reactions button, hit that, and there's a place to raise your hand. If that doesn't work, you can find your name in the participants list and raise your hand that way. But what I want to also do, Ms. Dunn, is let you know that you had spoken about, one of the questions that we always ask is how can people get involved? And the more specific suggestions you can give, the better, right? We know that people want specific action plans in order for them to get going, if possible. And when we're talking about, mental health programs, we're talking about legislation. So make sure that we talk a little bit about that, because you mentioned that. I want to make sure that we don't skirt over that issue while we're getting to Q&A. Okay, so let's maybe put a pin in that. Alex, we have 3 people up there. Let's let them get their questions answered, and then Ms. Dunn, just make sure you leave us some time to talk about legislation, if that's okay.
So we have, first up is Dean Usher, and then Norman Austin, and Cora Miles. Dean, please unmute.
Yes, can you hear me? Fine?
Yes.
All right, marvelous presentation. Thank you so much to the speakers. I think a lot of this is grounded in our history of knowing our history as African Americans. We live in a culture that has tried to keep us broken for centuries. The fact that we are broken is not an accident. The culture has kept us broken and continues to try to keep us broken. That's what second and third and fourth class citizenship means. That's one of the goals of white supremacy. What we have to do is understand that fact and understand the need to protect ourselves by strengthening ourselves against these forces that will always try to keep us sick and broken.
I totally agree with you, Dean. I am a part of a group outside of this, a national group called Motion for Justice, Reshaping Prosecution. And one of the things that we talk about is how it is almost designed, or the system is designed to keep us just that, right? And so we have to understand the power that we have to really bond together and disrupt and destroy the system. And so I really appreciate you for sharing that, because just recently I was in a conference with the Vera Institute. And so what we talk about is, that this prosecution has been embedded for years in racism, right? It's not a new factor. It's just now a known factor, and we can't rebuild it. We can't repair it. We need to destroy it and start all over again. And so I appreciate your comments there. Norman, I think you're up next, Mr. Norman.
Well, first, Dean, thank you. Please take your hand down. Norman, go ahead. Thank you.
How you doing? I really disagree with the concept of our communities being broken. That implies that it's something that we can fix. What's happening to our community is the society's fault. There's nothing that we can do about that. We can learn about the society, what's going on in society and why it's going on. And maybe it'll work on it that way. But from our standpoint, it does us no good to think that we're broken. The society is what needs to be worked on. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for your comments. I believe when we talk about our communities being broken, I hear you loud and clear. So sometimes the nomenclature that we use can kind of put us in a space and a place that allows us to believe that it's always us, right? And it's not necessarily us. And I think the reason why I'm giving you doctor title now, Reverend Lane Cobb's call, this call was really to understand that communities of color have been exacerbated by gun violence. And because historically there's been so much racism or underfunding resources that have allowed our communities to be disenfranchised, that now when you layer that on top of gun violence, our communities of color are almost marginalized, right? They're not almost, they are marginalized, and they're dealing with this, you know, on top of everything else that has happened or everything else. And so how do you kind of, you know, come out from, you know, all of this burden, all of this trouble that has been laid upon you? And I think that that's why, you know, and we're just talking, we don't have all the answers, Mr. Norman, I'll share that publicly, but I think we're just sharing with you our part and our perspectives on what can be done and what we are trying to do. So I appreciate you for your comments.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Norman. Cora, you can unmute.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Joanne Dunn and your team. I just wanted to follow up on some of the comments, especially what Dean Usher said. And what comes to mind is undoing racism workshops. A number of us have alluded to how systemic it is. And for all that we do, we talk about trauma, and I think undoing racism workshop, there are a number of places and organizations doing it. I think it's going to help us to think like broken and unbroken. I think, as someone mentioned, these systems are broken. They are broken. And I think one way to start to deal with that is some recognition, understanding, perspectives on the harm, the trauma that racism causes. So I would hope and look forward to and expect that interwoven in some of the work that SNUG and other groups are doing, to be sure to have this recognition of ways of undoing racism. I'll mention in particular, and some of you may know, in one particular workshop that does this is People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. And there are others, but that one to me is, you know, a good starting point. Thank you.
Do any of the panelists want to respond or?
I think I would just say on the undoing racism, we here in Westchester County have been charting that forward with Undoing Racism workshop and understanding how racism has been embedded in the systems or designed to keep Black and brown folks hostage in essence. We are doing a lot of education on undoing racism, because I think when you understand the floor and understand, and when I say floor, understand the context, it allows us to really chart new territory. So we are doing a lot of work with undoing racism. And I think also one of the things that we are doing here, Cora, to your point in regards to understanding the nomenclature and understanding different perspectives. One of the things is, like I said, the youth shelter, we are a alternative to incarceration program. So one of the things that we are also doing here at the youth shelter is elevating the voices of those who are have lived experience in the criminal justice system, who are known shooters or have been shot, because I think it's important to understand the root drivers of how they even got access to guns, or how they even, you know, what social deterrents have helped them get here or whatever. And so I think a lot of that is similarities in regards to understanding. You have to understand the drivers in order to fix or chart solutions. And so I appreciate your context, Cora. Thank you.
Thank you. So next we have Sheila Smith and Judith Bevel. Sheila, go ahead.
Good morning. I just wanted to first just thank you, Joanne, Paul, Deborah. I'm missing brother's name, but I just want to say thank you. I see you, I appreciate you. I thank God for you, for the work that you're doing, for the heart and passion that you're putting into it. And you are without a doubt leaving this world better than you inherited it. And for that, I just give you thanks. And I just wanted to lift up my own, not to beat the whole brokenness, no pun intended, piece, but for me personally, it's a trigger word. I wrote in the chat, the culture is broken, because I just think of, us like being a tree. If a tree is battered by storms and bad weather and conditions, we don't think of a tree as being broken. We just say, wow, that, and we think of it as being part of an environment that just kind of beat it down. And that's how I see, particularly people of color, Black people, that this environment was designed as has been said, to batter us, and, built on the fact that we were not really human to begin with. And that's still even part of some of the writings, that we're not fully human. So and then being a single parent, being raised by a single parent, hearing that term over the years, coming from a broken home. And I'm like, oh no, my home was not broken. Even my father wasn't there, but I had a granddaddy, I had uncles, I had brothers, I had very strong male figures in my family. And there was nothing, absolutely nothing broken about my family, just because the father was absent. So I just wanted to lift that up. And beloved Joanne, Deborah, I want to know your son's name, because I want to say his name.
My son's name was Randy Long.
Randy Long. Randy Long. Thank you.
You're welcome.
God bless you.
Thank you. Judith, you're up.
Thank you. And thank you to the guests for this very most critically important discussion. I don't know exactly how to engage our young people in large meetings or discussions, or I don't really have a strategy in mind. However, what we need to be telling them is that by shooting and killing each other, we are contributing to the genocide of our own people. We are contributing to self-genocide. These are genocidal practices. We are contributing to lowering the numbers of Black people, African Americans in this country. And when we look at the whole picture in terms of the potential for increasing our numbers, it's a very dismal picture. When we look at the numbers of young African American men who are of fatherhood age, who are in prison, when we look at the numbers of African American men who are choosing an alternative lifestyle that does not lend them to marrying women and procreating children, contributing to the numbers, our numbers in this country. When we look at the numbers of young African American men who are killing each other, we are contributing through our behavior. We are contributing to the lowering of numbers of African Americans in this country. And we need to realize that, as Malcolm X warned us, he said, don't become bamboozled. And that is exactly what is happening to us. So I agree with the gentleman, Norman, who said, this is not about our communities being broken, but it really is about our need to educate and inform each other. Those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat it. And we have to inform, we have to look at what we are doing to contribute to what is happening in our communities. Oh yes, we're being attacked by the outside through media. We're being attacked in many ways by people who do not care about the future of African Americans in this country. And we need to realize that. Thank you.
Can I jump in? Thank you, Ms. Judith, for your comments. And I think you really hit the nail on the head. One, we have to know our history. And then two, we have to educate and inform our people. And then I think one of the things that with educating and inform, I think a lot of times when it comes particularly to our young people, we talk at them a lot, right? We talk at them a lot, but we got to take we got to take it back. We have to sometimes just listen to what they're trying to tell us at times. A lot of times we don't listen to them. We want to talk to them and say, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this. No, tell me what's going on. Tell me what's going on. Let them steer the conversation. Then we could give them solutions, you know? But I do think it's also critical that we educate and inform them too in the same narrative.
And I'd like to piggyback. Thank you, Paul. And when we educate, we need to be truthful to our kids. I mean, I just had this conversation the other day. You know, when our kids go to school, the first thing they're taught is about slavery. What happened before slavery? Because there were other positive events. They instill this. There goes the start of the biases. This is what they know. We have to stop sugarcoating and be honest. I know now when working with youth who are traumatized, when you're straightforward with them, they accept you more and they appreciate you more, and they're more likely to allow you to lead them down the path. So, you know, I'm speaking with a lot of these individuals. Trust is a big thing. I live in Dutchess County. I'm going to put it out there. We're one of the most racist counties in the Hudson Valley. So to try to get the kids and the parents to trust, you know, we were talking about affordable housing in Dutchess County. We've been promised this for 30 years. We still don't have it. We are not going to be able to begin to change until those individuals who have made the promises fulfill them. So I just wanted to piggyback.
And before we get to the other two questions, I'd like to jump on that. I'd like to also jump on that too. I think also just giving you some context about Westchester County, New York, we are one of the richest counties in the nation. And yet our disparities are so clear when you look at our different communities. And I think that as we talk about, Judith, you asked, how can we get young people to the table to listen, to learn? And I think about that, like when I was growing up, and I'm only 21, but I think that when I was growing up, my mom used, you know, it was the village that, you know, they say it takes a village. And I remember my mom's neighbors, if we did something outside, you know, your neighbor would get you and bring you to your mother. And I get on these calls sometimes when we have listening or youth town halls, and they'll say, oh, we need the village back, or we need the community, and we need, you know, neighbors and things to step up. But when you also, the village doesn't look like the village anymore, right? And I think that that for me is that's that first call to Norman and just some of the points about like, how do we get unity back into our community, right? Because if we're going to chart our kids who are very untrusting of us at this point in space, who've seen us in our own dysfunction as adults, arguing on social media and doing all these crazy things, how do our kids, you know, heal forward if we as adults haven't gotten to a space to really come together and chart different waters? And so I think that what's so important for me is because I can't tell the young people about, you know, it's the village that raised me, it's the village that helped me get to where I am, when they don't understand the context of the village anymore, or the village has lost its credibility in essence. So I think that one of the things that, you know, and I'll talk to you some about the action items we're doing here locally, but it's really about how do we unite the community again to rally back around our children, right? We can't ask our children to talk when we as adults aren't even listening, or we're trying to push our own agendas forward. And so I think that I just wanted to add that context before we got to the two questions.
Thank you. So we have Leah Nelson and then back to Norman Austin. Leah, go ahead.
Hi, thank you all so much for your work You're boots on the ground, grassroots. And I feel like, oh, Deborah, I'm so sorry for your loss as well. And my heart is really with you. I feel like you're doing incredible, necessary, emergency work, fixing what's been the harm that's been done. And I feel like it's going to be a multi-prong effort. You guys are working from the bottom in a very necessary area with troubled kids and trying to make it so no one else dies a brutal murder. I am working with the Poor People's Campaign and trying to get elected officials that are actually going to make a change in underfunded communities and put the money, use money where it's most necessary to fix this problem. I was wondering what you thought about the Poor People's Campaign and trying to get a different set of electeds elected that are actually going to do the work, changing where money is spent in this community and this country to change systemic racism and put money where it's actually needed the most to stop this kind of problem. I mean, I've heard statistics about when you give a person a living wage and a job, crime goes down. And I think it's a kind of a no-brainer that we fund the underfunded, neglected communities. Thank you.
Leah, I don't know how you put like 2 claps on the, Zoom thing, but I totally agree with you that, and Paul has put it in the chat, that we need to hold our politicians accountable. I would say, 1, I agree with you that, we're doing the emergency work, and these are like what we call here at the youth shelter, Band-Aid solutions to a larger problem. And so I think, we have to go further. It is, we have to not only do the work to kind of help triage what's happening in the communities currently, but how do we systemically keep them going and sustain them so that way our communities are not always in a reactive mode. And that is through the work of galvanizing your local, city, countywide elected officials, along with your congressmen and state national leaders. One of the things here at the youth shelter, we have not only gotten involved in our work, our local elected officials, but we are galvanizing our congressmen because, we're saying that you need to go back to the, Federal House of Appropriations and tell them why we need this money, and not only why we need this money, but if we're going to move Mount Vernon forward in regards to, jobs, housing, mental health access for everyone, that requires resources, and that resources is money, right? And we need that money in order to triage the funding, to triage communities and help us go forward. So I think you're totally right. I think that we could have a whole nother conversation about the Poor People's Campaign and the work that you're doing in regards to not only just galvanizing funding, but everything from workforce to housing, all those things. And I think, again, rooted in this gun violence is the social deterrences, right? And I think that we haven't yet had a real conversation about how those social deterrences have exacerbated gun violence in communities of color.
Okay, thank you, Leah. Next, Norman, and then back to Cora. Go ahead, Norman.
The thing that I came back in for was we have a problem with our educational system in that they teach us to disrespect ourselves. We continually say things like black on black crime and how black people are killing black people. It's very easy to find out what percentage of black people are killed by other black people, and find out what percentage of white people are killed by other white people. The Chinese people, same thing, everybody. It's a human thing that people kill people. And the percentages are the same across all races. There's nothing special about the way we kill each other. So y'all really need to, I mean, it takes 2 minutes to look that up. The statistics are there. Believe them and quit telling the same stuff that you've been taught, because it's not true. That's all.
I'm actually sharing in the chat box a resource for everyone. It is where you can learn about gun violence in your community, and you would click that link and you would put in your zip code, and there it would give you the stats on gun violence in your community. Okay. Reverend Lane, we're in sync with one another.
Okay. Thank you, Norman. Cora Miles.
I'm thinking of the idea of it takes a village. And I use that expression periodically when something really good comes about. Right now, from this conversation, is causing me to give some, to reflect on that idea. Most recently in White Plains, I've experienced that around the statue of Harriet Tubman being in the village square here in White Plains, and where the community's coming together. And I get such a feeling of this is the town square. This is the place where the community comes together, and it lifts me up, and I feel so inspired and so wonderful, physically as well as emotionally and mentally. There was another occasion also having to do with Harriet Tubman, the abolitionist, Union spy, nurse, all of that. And it was done after, it was a program that followed a Shabbat service at a synagogue. That was Friday. Today, I am still on an emotional high by the feeling of the community coming together. And yet, I'm asking myself, is my feeling of us being a village and coming, is it just me, or are other people feeling it as well? And I guess I pause to say, maybe I need to go a step further in recognizing and realizing the sense of building. It takes a village, it takes a community. So personally, I think I want to do a little bit more work on that to see if there are ways that I can extend that and carry that forward, so that it really is a sense of more of the village coming together.
Hey, Cora, I would say that I think that this is, I don't know, I'm a talker, so I think that this is why Reverend Lane, Drive, and Alex have put this call together, is because, one, I would say that we're just we're not even experts. We're just, the panelists are people who are closest to the work, who are working with those closest to the problem to help drive solutions. And I think that, and I can share with you, like here in my community, there was a recent killing of a young girl that was 17 years old. And while I did not know the young lady at all personally, it tugged at me to say, what can I do as a woman and as a mom? I can no longer sit back and not do anything. And I have to tell you, what I did, Cora, was I called the community together. I did a Zoom call. I called the community together. We had over 91 local community leaders and advocates join that call who said, I don't know what I need to do, but I want to help. I want to help. And I have to tell you, from that, I wrote a grant. I said, well, let me see if I can write a grant and see if they would fund a community coordinator to help us really call the community to action. And you know what? We got funded. I got the call this morning. And I tell you that because I think that one small step actually leads to, small impacts, small steps lead to larger impacts. And I say that because the community came back to me after we had our third call, and they said, Joanne, we want to be trained. We don't want to touch the children yet until we're equipped. We want to also set up safety zones at our churches to figure out if young people can come in, and we create hotspots for them where they can come and one night play chess over here, one night play bingo over here, whatever it is. And we did that. We wrote a grant and we actually got funded. I got the call this morning. And so I say to you, Cora, whatever drives you to be a part of that narrative to make a change, go and do that. Go and do that. Because, they used to tell me when I joined this leadership Westchester class, they said, whatever wakes you up at night and is like bothering you, go fix that. Go do that. And so I say that to you because you can be the driver that other people need to help cultivate them to be a part of a bigger solution. And I tell you that because now we have over 150 people in the community of Mount Vernon, which is, we still got our stuff, but who are actively involved in trying to chart solutions. And there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to this. As Leah said, this is a multifaceted issue, and it's going to take a multi-pronged approach to do it, from local grassroots to legislation and pushing, and some people knocking down the doors of our elected officials. So thank you, Cora, for really thinking about what it means to take a village. And whatever you need, I will put my information in the chat. But call me. AJ Woodson is actually a part of your co-host. He's a part of our community call to action. And we got the call this morning for the grant, AJ. So I'm excited.
Congratulations. That is awesome. So we were coming to the end of our time together. We would love to hear some success stories, maybe individuals or families or neighborhood stories where your work has been successful. We'd love to hear any stories that you want to share to help us close up.
And they'll have to be quick stories, and because we still need to hear, we want to hear how you want us to get involved. And I heard your call to Cora Miles, and notice also, we got a whole lot of people on here are white folk. We got a lot of folk that don't know about communities of color, and we need a way to motivate people. What do you want us to do? So success stories, and what do you want us to do?
Got you. I'll let my team or panel jump in on success stories, and then Reverend Lane, I'll close out with the how do you move the needle?
I have a very quick one. He was responsible for probably 70% of the shootings in the city of Poughkeepsie. Entered SNUG. We worked with him, changed his mindset, got his high school equivalency, and now is an official student of the Culinary Institute of America.
I see we had a question and hand raised, so I didn't know if we wanted to pivot to that, but it might be.
We really don't have time for questions now. We just want to stay with you panelists. We would like you guys to have the last word. Someone else, what's your success stories? Because we know you got them.
I think our success story here at the Boys and Girls Club is obviously we're fairly a new program with the gun and violence prevention program. But I think our success stories are just our students are out there now. They're out there speaking for what they want, and they're out there protesting. They're at the store. And just recently, with them being in Albany, all our statewide leaders come to Albany all the time. They were able to speak and meet with Speaker of the House, Assembly Speaker of the House, Carl Hastie. And they were able to gather some pictures with him and speak with him. And we're currently in the process of setting a tour up so our kids could go up there and visit and see how some of the laws and some of the things are made. So that's some of our success stories at the Boys and Girls Club of Albany Capital District.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I know that we have a few more minutes and just want to talk about like what you can do to help. And I know that we have, like Reverend Lane said, we have a lot of white people on the call, and we're talking about communities of color. And so I think that and I'm going to say it, your whiteness helps open doors that sometimes many people of color cannot get access to. And so I would say, one, be involved, get involved. If you're not involved now, get involved with an organization, or if there's a neighborhood that's close to you that is grappling with gun violence that is predominantly of color, please go learn about that community, right? Go learn about that community, get involved in that community, also help them open doors in that community. I would say, I started here at the shelter as the first Black woman, didn't know a lot about policy and legislation, but it was actually a white colleague of mine that knocked open the door for me to have access to our elected officials. I was trying, I was calling, and nobody was answering my call. And so I think that you white people have access just by their skin tone to certain doors and certain opportunities. So one, we need you to get involved. And of course, Mom Demands Action. I'm going to really pivot to them as well, because they are a national organization that is in this work. And we at the youth shelter have taken a lot of guidance from them in regards to their work and what they're doing. And so they have some steps on how you can take action that I'm actually going to share with you. And they talk about learn about gun violence in your community. So you're going to go on everystat.org and learn about gun violence. Yes?
Yeah, hi. What's going on?
Okay, so that's not me. And then what you're also going to do, what I would also say too, is you need to learn about that community and the drivers of violence in that community. So if there are a lot of housing inequities, a lot of not mentorship opportunities, for instance, like Erica put in OYP court in New Rochelle, they have mentors. If there's an issue with those, you want to start charting what those barriers are so that we can start thinking about solutions. So you want to understand the drivers of violence and the complex issues of gun violence, and then how do we start to chart solutions? And then I think also that I believe here that everyone can lead from the chair. You can lead from the chair, you can lead from, wherever you sit. And I think that one, it's just about getting involved. And so you can join Moms Demand Action, you can join an organization, you can also bring together, Cora, members in your community and create a, interfaith group with your churches and your pastors, elected officials, your community members, and really chart a community coalition. But I think everyone can help. And I think that it's you taking your time, your talent, your treasures to be involved. I mean, like AJ says, everyone can't not be on the front lines like Paul and Henry and Deborah and like myself, but you might be a writer like AJ, and you might be able to write stories, or you may be able to help us cultivate press releases on how do we, push our local elected officials. So I think that there's so many things that you can do here. I mean, it's hard, but I just say you have to get involved. I mean, that's the main thing. You have to get involved. And I think also you have to vote. Elections are so important. And I know that we talk a lot about national trends and national things, but it's really on the local level that you have to get involved. And so I think I'm going to stop there because I know we're up to time, but locally get involved, because the people closest to the problem can help chart solutions. And then that will help us bridge a larger conversation on the federal and national level. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Joanne Dunn. Thank you to all of our panelists. We're so pleased to have you with us today. Mr. Henry Terry and Ms. Deborah Long of SNUG and Mr. Paul Dunn of the Boys and Girls Club. We so appreciate you. I know that there are some suggestions in the chat about organizations that you can get involved. If you'd like to save the chat, you can go down onto the right-hand side, the lower right-hand side, the 3 dots there, hover over that, hit that, that will show you how to save the chat and the information that's in there. I also want to thank my co-host for today, Mr. Alex McCulloch. I'm going to also put his information into the chat. You can find out more about his books at alexmcculloch.com, ALEXMIKULICH.com. And please join us next Wednesday for another inclusive, courageous conversation about race in America. Our speaker next week will be Ms. Muriel Tillingast of Lucy's Children. My co-host will be Mr. AJ Woodson. If you are not on our mailing list, you can do so by emailing me at info@racetalkrevolution.com. If you have guests or topics that you'd like to hear from, please go ahead and email me at the same email address as well. And if you'd like our programs and you'd like to support us and you're feeling generous, you can give us a donation at our website, which is racetalkrevolution.com. Alex, please close us down if you would. Last words from you.
Thank you so much to really outstanding panelists. Thank you for your witness. Thank you for everything that you're doing to heal the wounds of systemic racism. And thank you to everyone for a great conversation today. All grace and peace be with all of you.
Thank you, Alex. And again, if you want to follow Ms. Dunn, ysow.org. Am I right? ysow.org. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week. Please join us again. You all don't be strangers, and we will definitely bring you all back. All righty. So thank you so much. Keep up the work and let us know how we can support you. Much love, everybody. Bye-bye.